Hey there, Carrie Rhoades here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm excited that you're here with me today because I am sharing part 4 in the Concord and Ninth Feature Friday series. I've been guest designing for them with their newest release, and this is the last one. I've loved every minute of it, and I think today is my favorite one because it features turnabout stamps, specifically the Tropical Vibes Turnabout Stamp and Die Set. Such a fun summery set, and I had a blast playing with it. I love turnabout stamping, and if you haven't seen any of my turnabout videos before, I will link a few of them in the description box below, and you can check those out because it is one of my favorite things. I love to make my own backgrounds, so turnabout stamping is just right up my alley. So let's make 3 cards featuring the Tropical Vibes Turnabout Stamp and Die Set. All right, this is the stamp that comes in the Tropical Vibes stamp set that is for doing turnabout stamping. When you're ready to stamp with it, you need to turn it face down so that the part that you ink up is face down. And you're going to lay this on the alignment aid that comes with the stamp set so it lines up with the printed images exactly. And then you're going to bring out the Turnabout Jig. This is sold separately, and you'll need it when you do turnabout stamping. You're going to line the X from the alignment aid up with the X on the jig. Once those are aligned, you can close the door of your stamp positioning tool to pick up the stamp. Then you can go ahead and remove the alignment aid, and you are ready to turnabout stamp. You can take a 6x6 piece of paper, or I'm using a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of paper and lining it up with the registration marks on my turnabout jig. And I'm inking this up with hazelnut ink from Altenew. All the inks I'm using today are by Altenew except one. Well, 2 really. So this hazelnut color I love. It's kind of a golden brown, and I think it's one of those inks that's going to look different with different colors depending on what you pair it with. So I like to double stamp when I'm doing turnabout stamping. It's easy with the images being so spread out on a large area to not ink one as good as maybe another. Then you're going to clean off your image, and when you're ready for color number 2, you're going to turn that jig so that the 2 on the jig is now in the upper right corner. The second color of ink that I'm using is maple yellow, and that is a really sunshine yellow. It's really fun. So I'll go ahead and stamp that down. And all the colors I am going to stamp 2 times, even if I don't show it in this video, just to save some time so this is not a super long video. This third color, color number 3, is Forest Glades, and I made sure before I inked it up to turn my jig so now the number 3 on the jig is in the upper right corner, and stamp that down. Always remember to clean that stamp off in between inkings. The last color is Rouge. Don't you love that name? Rouge. It's so, I don't know, vintage, old-fashioned. All right, so notice here that my jig is not all the way down into the corner of my stamp positioning tool. This is not good. I didn't notice it until I went to double stamp it. And you'll notice that my pineapple in the upper left corner, how the top of the pineapple, the leaf part, is not all the way down on the body of the pineapple. So I decided I would not stamp it down again because I could mess it up, and that one stamping was just fine for the Rouge color. So that's a good reminder, is to check to make sure that your stamp positioning tool or that your jig is all the way down in the corner, because sometimes when stamping you can move that around because, you know, clear stamps are kind of sticky. So I'm trimming this down to be 4 inches by 5 1/4. I just prefer doing turnabout stamping on the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch size because it fits in those registration marks. All right, so after I did that, I went ahead and took that Good Vibes die, which is the coordinating die set for the Good Vibes stamp and die set, and I die cut it from gold mirror paper, and then I'm gluing that down onto a piece of vellum, and I am making sure to save that tiny little dot on the eye so I can stick that down. Don't lose those things, right? All right, so now I'm going to stamp the second sentiment for this card that says summer, and I'm using that Rouge color again. Love it. So I like to when stamping images like this one that have the letters cut into a square, it's easy to over ink that and fill up that space with ink. So if you ink it lightly and stamp it a couple or 3 times with your stamp positioning tool, you're less likely to get those letters filled up with ink. All right, I'm going to do some basic ink blending here with 2 of the colors that I used on my background, Rouge and Maple Yellow. And now I know this looks really blotchy, but that's okay for what I'm doing. You're going to see it's going to be fine. And then the Maple Yellow, and I made sure and cleaned my brush off on a dry cloth in between. I'm going to take another die from this set. It's 2 flowers. I didn't cut them apart because I thought most of the time I would go ahead and use them together, and it's worked fine. All right, so now I'm taking 2 darker colors that go together with the lighter colors. So for the pink flowers, I'm doing Velvet, and for the yellow flowers, I'm doing Honey Drizzle ink. Now, I don't know if you know, but Altenew inks come in sets of 4, so it's easy to figure out what light and dark colors to use together. All right, so now we can go ahead and start gluing things down. I'm putting glue just behind the letters and the sentiment strips so that the glue does not show through my vellum. And just before I glued it, I decided I want the pineapple that's like the real pineapple colors to be up at the top for some reason. So then I will add these 2-toned flowers, and I love how they turned out. You'll see that I use this technique on all 3 of my cards today. So I thought it was really fun, and using the teeny tiny blending brush that's like tiny, round, like the size of a pencil eraser, perfect. And then after gluing on all my flowers, I decided I wanted some gold silk on there. So I covered up what I already did, where I didn't want the silk, with a Post-it note. And then I was able to put splatter all around that, and it just looks amazing. I love that look. So I have a piece of fun foam here that I'm going to put behind my card front so I can pop it up onto my card base. And I'll do glue on the side that's going to be attached to the card base. So we'll stick that down, and I wanted one more thing for this card, which was something to put in the center of those flowers. So once that has settled and is dry, I'm going to add some gold pearls to the center and just a couple extra on the card for decorative purposes. And that finishes card number 1. So one way to use your Turnabout is to use 4 different colors of ink to make your background. The second way is to go ahead and stamp it and then emboss it. So the 3 colors I used are Blush, Citrus Burst, and Evergreen. And then for the 4th stamping, I'm going to be using clear pigment ink to emboss with. And because I'm doing that, I want to make sure the ink on the paper already is dry. So I just dried it really quickly with my heat gun, making sure not to melt the plastic. So moving the gun quickly and keeping it farther away than when embossing. I'm going to clean off this excess ink from my jig because I'm going to rub it with the anti-static tool, and I didn't want to accidentally pick up any of that ink and rub it onto my nice background. All right, so now I'm stamping down my background stamp with the number 4 in the upper right corner with clear pigment ink, and now I'm going to sprinkle on some silver embossing powder. And because I use that anti-static powder tool, this powder should stick only to my stamped images where I use the clear pigment ink. All right, so let's go ahead and melt and emboss these images, and then we'll go ahead and trim this down. This one is going to measure 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. And I went ahead and cut off just one side of the card instead of a little bit from both sides because one side had barely any silver on it. So that was an easy choice. But on the top and the bottom, I did a little bit from the top and a little bit from the bottom. I'm going to die cut a circle from the center of this one because I'm going to be making this into a shaker card because I love shaker cards. So we'll glue this down to a mat of dark green cardstock, and you see I've already cut the center of that out with a rectangle die so it doesn't show in my shaker window, but I still have that border of dark green all the way around. So we'll let that dry, and once it is dry, I will take a window sheet and stick that to the back of this panel with some double stick tape. I'm going to stamp some sentiments from the stamp set that says Happy Thoughts with that evergreen ink. And again, I'm inking it lightly and stamping it a couple times so I don't fill up those letters with ink because my pads are juicy, and that works really good for these. These sentiments do not have dies, so I did go ahead and fussy cut them out, which is really easy on a rectangle, right? All right, so I'm ink blending again to make the flowers for this card. The first color I used was the blush, the same color in the background, and then to accent the edges, I'm using Rouge. And see that tiny little blending brush? It is perfect for this. All right, now the background behind my shaker is also an ink blended panel. So I'm using that Citrus Burst, which is just a really, really soft yellow color. And then once I get the background blended, I'm going to stamp over the top of it with some flowers from the Toucan Paradise stamp set that I used a couple weeks ago. And it is the perfect little accent to this background. It just needed a little something extra. So I just clustered all those stamps on one block together and then stamped them over the top. And because I used the blending brush, that ink layer is much lighter than had I used a blending sponge. All right, so now we just need to create the box, or I call it a reservoir, to hold our shaker elements. Now my tape was a little wide, so I measured out how much I thought I would need, and then I cut it down the middle. Now these scissors that I have are resistant to stickiness, so it's nice that I can use those to cut this down when I need to. So I put the two skinny strips on the side, and then I was able to finish off the bottom with a full size strip, and then I added some more adhesive so that my whole back of my card is covered. Not one part of it's going to be loose from the background of the card. So I'm using silver shavings, I love these, from Fun Stamper's Journey, and it has a cute jar, like it's so much fun. And this will be my shaker elements. Not only is it silver, so it matches my card, but it kind of looks like sand. So I thought it was a really fun element to use in this shaker card. So I covered that up with my ink blended background, and then I can go ahead and stick this down to my pink card base, and it'll have a nice little pink border all the way around. And we'll just let that set for a minute, and then we'll glue on our extra pieces here. So I've die cut some leaves, also from the Tropical Vibes die set. So many good dies in this set. And I'm going to glue those down to the top left corner of my shaker window. And this liquid glue works really well even on top of the window sheet, which is important. We don't want things falling off later. And then here's my little flowers that are light pink with a darker pink edge. And I'm going to layer these up on top of each other this time, and I'm going to line them up instead of offset them, like that. And then the sentiment I'm going to glue right to the window itself. So I'm going to put the thoughts on first towards the bottom, and then I thought it would help me be able to line up the happy better. And we'll just give that a little bit of time to dry. I'm going to take some rhinestones that are really silvery to accent this card, and that will finish it up. That's a really bright and fun shaker card. I love playing with the different colors for this background stamp and seeing what combinations I can do that still feel tropical. And I love light pink with dark green for tropical things. All right, for card number 3, I'm using 4 shades of gray ink, the Rock Collection from Alt New. So if you start with your lightest gray and work your way up to the darkest gray, you don't have to clean your stamp off in between. And here's another trick that I like to do. I stamp it down for the final time, and before I switch colors, I stamp it down again, kind of stamping off that excess ink. And then you just move on to the next color. So there's my tip for stamping with 4 shades of one color. All right, so now I'm taking the mid-tone gray to ink up the edge of this panel. It's Silverstone ink. So I'm taking one of the largest blending brushes so that I can blend a little bit in. I'm not doing just the edge, I'm blending a little farther in. Then I'm going to come back with a smaller brush and the Industrial Diamond, so 1 shade darker, of gray ink, and I'm going to do just the edge. So it really helps draw your eye into the center of this card. And here's something I have found about Altenew ink, and if you use Altenew inks, I would love to know if you find this. It's kind of magical because when you first lay it down, especially if you're ink blending, it's like, is it even there? And then after a minute, it's like the ink shows up. It's magical. Yeah. All right, so I'm stamping the Toucan from the Toucan Paradise stamp set with pure graphite. It's the darkest gray in that rock collection that I was talking about at the beginning that I stamped my background with. And I inked it up 2 times to make it really dark. And now I'm going to stamp the little line image that's supposed to look like feathers on his chest with Coral Berry, which is one of my current favorite stamp pads. And then I brought in carrot ink from Fawn because I don't have any orange inks from Alt New yet. They're on their way. But I love this carrot color from Fawn, and so I thought I would try to offset the lines, and it ends up that I stamped right on top of the pink ones. So I had to stamp it again. And then I used that tiny ink blending tool to blend some of that orange ink over the top. I felt like it made it look puffy right there. So that's my little trick. All right, so now I die cut that before I stamp his beak. The die cut of the beak is your guide for lining this up. So the largest part I stamped with the Coral Berry, and the smaller piece I'm stamping with carrot ink. And you just line up that line that goes down the beak to get those 2 pieces to be lined up with each other. All right, so I'm bringing back in my scrap of white cardstock, and I'm doing some ink blending in Coral Berry. I'm going for an ombre type look that I can die cut my sentiment from. So I want it to be darker at the bottom than it is at the top. And so I'll just keep repeating that until I get it as dark as I want. And I will take that Good Vibes die and die cut. I only need the word vibes, so it doesn't really matter that the good hung off here. I just want vibes. I'll set that aside and save it. And then I'm doing some orange or carrot ink blending for my flowers. So we'll die cut those, and somehow I die cut it and never lost the little I for the I in vibes, even though I left it in there when I die cut my flowers. And to darken up the edges of those flowers, I use the carrot ink again. So I'm gluing my background to a 4 1/4 by 11-inch card base that was scored at 5.5. And then I'm going to put all the elements on this card. I popped up the bird, and then the rest will get glued down, or the sentiments will get glued down, including the little dot to the eye that I did not lose. I'm so happy about that, because it's ink blended. It would be hard to recreate, or harder than just die cutting paper. Now for the flower that goes on the bird's head, because I can't not make this bird without a flower, I am going to offset the flower this time, and then it just looks more full and puffy, I think. Now I'm using some rhinestones to accent this card and finish it up. And those are the 3 cards. I had so much fun. I love Turnabout stamping. I will link, like I said, some other of my Turnabout videos below for you, but I would love to know which of these 3 cards is your favorite. So leave me a comment below and let me know which one is your favorite. And I just love to connect with you guys. So reach out and we can chit chat about card making. If you have any questions, let me know. All the products I use are listed and linked for you below. And I will be back again on Monday with another video. So if you haven't yet, subscribe and hit the bell so you know when I have a new video. I thank you so much for stopping by, and happy stamping. Bye.